and I'm your host for tonight, and my name is TJ Chambers. I'm going to be doing a new series on the FairTax. This is something that's gaining in popularity, and I'm seeing it more and more, and I'm seeing a lot more people voice their vote for the FairTax, but I'm finding some very interesting things when I discuss the FairTax with people. I ask them questions, and it seems to be that, they're not as knowledgeable as they may think they are or as they put on. And how many of them have not even read the FairTax bill, I don't know. It's rare for me to come across someone who's read the FairTax bill, but yet they support it. I even had a discussion with a friend of mine that was running to be, I think it was a senator in Missouri. I had a discussion with her about the FairTax. And I did some preliminary research into the FairTax, just saw pretty much what it's about. And I just had no interest in it. So I decided, let me look further into this, because more and more people that, say they're patriots and everything are talking about this. And so I decided that with this research that I was doing, when I discussed with these people, that this is something that would benefit Hour of the Times listeners. We're going to get into the history and some of the people that are behind the FairTax, and we will also get into the FairTax bill itself. It's really interesting how short the bill is, but yet hardly anybody's read it. But that's what they complain about, all these congressmen and senators that won't read bills, but they sign off on it, but nobody else is reading bills and they're supporting it. So they're no different, really. Welcome back. This is TJ Chambers, your host tonight. And we are going to be discussing the FairTax. There's a lot out there, as I was saying earlier, about the FairTax, and I'm seeing it more and more. And I saw this little flyer, and I read through it about the FairTax, and so I was like, all right, well, I already got an understanding what it's about, and it's not for me, not something I need to support. Just another one of those federal inquisitions, I guess you could call it that. But then I went to this, what was it, Tea Party or Tea Party rally or some Tea Party thing. And they had this big stadium all rented out, some 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 people, I don't know. A bunch of people there. And one of the main sponsors, banners, flags, whatever you want to call them, just everywhere. And it was the FairTax. And I was like, well, that's interesting. Because I thought a FairTax was just, pretty much some bill that they're trying to pass. So where's all this money coming from? Because it costs money to advertise. It costs money to rent out a stadium. So to be a sponsor to help put events on, these grassroots events, that's important to remember, grassroots, because we're going to need that for later. So I was like, where's all this money coming from, and what in the world is going on? So I decided to start looking more into it and had a discussion, as I mentioned, with my friend. She's running, I think she might still be in the running right now for Senate. I doubt very much that she'll get in. But she kept talking about, actually she didn't. Her website said that she was for the FairTax. So I decided I'm going to start questioning her on it. And so I questioned her about her run, and she's like, we have these people in office, and they're voting for these bills and they don't read them and they don't do this. I said, okay, I see that your website says you support the fair tax. Like, oh yes, I support the fair tax. We need to get rid of the IRS, and this is the only way to get rid of the IRS. And I said, have you read the bill? I said, I bought the book. I've been meaning to read the book. I haven't read it. I said, no, I'm not talking about the book. I want to know, have you read the fair tax bill? It's like, no, I haven't read it. I said, so basically, you're running to be senator. You're trying to replace people who won't read bills, but who will vote for them. And you would vote for the fair tax because you're all for it, and you have not read the bill. And you're supposed to be a patriot, and you're going to bring change, and you're going to change things and make it better. I told her, I'm usually a point blank person. I'm just going to say what I feel. And I told her, I said, you're not any different than, what you're trying to replace and you're trying to change. So you'll see that people that are supposed to be the solution are not any different. They are the same problem that we already have. As Bill Cooper said many years ago, we have these career politicians, like for example, Brownback in Kansas was a senator, tried to run to be president, didn't make it, so now he decided, you know what, I'm going to be governor of Kansas then, so now he's running to be governor. These are people that go to college for political science and they want to have their career in politics, and they climb the political ladder. These are career politicians that Bill Cooper said we need to get out of there. So let's start going into the fair tax. Now, if you go to the FairTax website, I think it's just fairtax.org. One of the first things I noticed was, a real interesting logo. So the FairTax is illuminated. Then there's this like weird squiggly kind of thing with a star in the middle of it. Now I was looking at that, it's like, well, what a weird symbol. It's kind of has like maybe a dual thing, like it's a rising star, the trail of the rising star, but this symbol, kind of looks like a ribbon, but it's in the shape to where it looks like a snake. And the snake head is looking back upon itself, but it's also facing the fair tax, and it's all illuminated, and it has the pentagram, which pointing up in the head of the snake. So for Mystery Babylon fans, that's pretty significant when you see that. And so on their website, I went to about the fair tax. And so they have the origins of the income tax. Now you have to remember, you have to pay attention to details, and you have to think, because a lot of marketing is basically mind control. I need to tell you emotionally, I need to build up your emotions and try to get you to buy into what I want to sell you. So it's not necessarily about the facts. You mix some facts with some emotional stuff and maybe hide some of the truth that you don't want people to know about. All right, origins of the income tax. And you can go to the FairTax's website and you can see this for yourself. The federal income tax was established in 1913, which is when the Federal Reserve Bank Act was passed in Congress at the end of the year. It actually required an amendment to the United States Constitution to make it legal. Why? Our founding fathers believed that taxing individuals on their private income was economic folly. They were right. The absence of an income tax, a tax on productivity, allowed our economy to grow and individuals prosper for 124 years. Now, they say here that our founding fathers believed that it was economic folly to tax, for taxing individuals. But I really think, and I can only go with my opinion, but I think it goes further than that, that it's about your money, what you own and what you earn is your property, and you have rights to your property, and the government cannot come in and just take your property without due process. And it's yours. You have a right to it. You don't have to give it up, and no one can come in and violate your right to your property. So they can't come in and just take it with a gun to your head. And that's part of the reason why there's the right to have arms. So see, they left that out and just say economic folly. And so it even says we had an absence of income tax for 124 years. So do we really need it? Do we really need an income tax if we didn't have one for 124 years? Let's keep going. The original income tax legislation affected only individuals earning $4,000 or more per year at a time when the overwhelming majority of Americans earn far less. The 16th Amendment was eventually ratified and added to the Constitution, and a national income tax was born. So, some of my questions are, well, was it properly ratified? They don't address that here. And, in the 16th Amendment, when you read that, Congress cannot increase its powers because they tried to increase their powers to tax any income where it's from without the census or anything, when the Constitution specifically outlines it out. So basically what they try to do is cancel out what the Constitution had said. But where in the Constitution does it say that they can do that? And then what is the jurisdiction of Congress legislative powers? So let's say they did pass it. Well, their legislative powers would only apply to D.C. anyway. So it doesn't matter if 16th Amendment, was even properly ratified. It doesn't matter. They can't increase their own powers, and then it's only going to apply to D.C. anyway, not to everybody else. And this is where federal jurisdiction comes in. Let's continue on. The 16th Amendment was simply worded. The tax return consisted of only one page, and the entire tax code itself consisted of only 14 pages. No one could have imagined the vast impact it would have on the lives of their children, grandchildren, and future generations of Americans. Since then, the federal income tax system has become so complex that it requires tens of millions of Americans to seek professional help to comply with it. Not to mention the enormous, expensive federal bureaucracy required to enforce and administer the tax. The Internal Revenue Service employs more investigative agents than the FBI and the CIA combined, and with 144,000 employees, employs more people than all but the 36 largest corporations in the United States. In addition to the $10 billion needed to operate the IRS, at least $256 billion, that is $900 for every man, woman, and child in this country, must be added to account for the cost of complying with the tax codes. Massive amounts of our national wealth are consumed merely by measuring, tracking, sheltering, documenting, and filing our annual income. Now, what they say is that the tax codes start out at only 14 pages. Well, guess what? The FairTax bill is over 200 pages, or over, I think it's maybe just under 200 pages. Sorry, I forget how many pages it is. Might be like 190 something or something like that. So right now, the FairTax bill is starting with more pages than what the tax code started with. And what they say, the tax code originally was, it's simple. Well, we know what it's turned into today. So what stops the FairTax bill from turning into another income tax code that gets complex and grows in size? They don't address this. They just say, look how simple this is. It's the whole, create a problem, and then you create the solution to get the control that you want. And for me, this is my personal opinion. I'm reading this last paragraph, and they say that at least $265 billion is the cost for complying with the tax code. Well, it sounds like to me, if we want to help the economy, we can eliminate $265 billion just by getting rid of, when I say eliminate, that means in cost to us, just eliminate the tax code. Eliminate the tax code so we don't have to file. And that would be the solution. That would put $265 billion back into our economy. What can happen to our economy with an extra $265 billion? And the other thing is that, where in the Constitution does it allow for an income tax on people? Well, they try to say it's the 16th Amendment, but no, it's not the 16th Amendment, because Congress gave themselves powers that they don't have, so they didn't really give it to them. So the 16th Amendment doesn't give Congress the power to do something that they don't have the power to do. So just ask people that. Where does Congress have the power to give themselves more power that the Constitution limits and does not give them the power to do? Yeah, that'll put them in a head spin. See how they come up with an answer for that one. So continuing in about the FairTax, what is the FairTax plan? Remember, this is from their website. The FairTax plan is a comprehensive proposal that replaces all federal income and payroll-based taxes with an integrated approach, including a progressive national retail sales tax, a prebate to ensure no American pays federal taxes on spending up to the poverty level, dollar for dollar, federal revenue neutrality, and through companion legislation, the repeal of the 16th Amendment. Now, so far, I don't see anything that guarantees that the 16th Amendment will be repealed, and we will see more about that. And also says a prebate to ensure no American pays federal taxes, but I'm going to show you it's not Americans. Wait till you see this trick that happens with this play on words. The FairTax Act, H.R. 25 or S-296, is nonpartisan legislation. It abolishes all federal personal corporate income taxes, gift, estate, capital gains, alternative minimum, Social Security, Medicare, and self-employment taxes, and replaces them with one simple, visible federal retail sales tax administered primarily by existing state sales tax authorities. The FairTax taxes us only on what we choose to spend on new goods or services, not on what we earn. The FairTax is a fair, efficient, transparent, and intelligent solution to the frustration and equity of our current tax system. So the FairTax, enables workers to keep their entire paychecks, enables retirees to keep their entire pensions, refunds in advance, the tax on purchases of basic necessities, allows American products to compete fairly, brings transparency and accountability to tax policy, ensures Social Security and Medicare funding, closes all loopholes and brings fairness to taxation, and abolishes the IRS. So my question is, really, will it really do this? Now let's talk a little bit about people that are behind the FairTax and the FairTax organization, because a FairTax organization is a non-for-profit organization. So continuing in about the FairTax, about Americans for Fair Taxation, fairtax.org. Americans for Fair Taxation was formed in 1995 as a 501c4 nonprofit, nonpartisan grassroots organization solely dedicated to replacing the current tax system. It began as a research organization with the initial goal of finding out what the American people wanted in a tax system, what they felt was the best way for the government to collect revenue, and how taxation could be achieved in a way that most benefited the economy and the taxpayers. We're going to come back to some of these. Many diverse groups of Americans participated in the extensive polling and focus group studies and then a nonpartisan team of economists was commissioned to develop the FairTax plan. The organization today has hundreds of thousands of members and volunteers nationwide. Its plan supports sound economic research, education of citizens and community leaders, and grassroots mobilization efforts. The FairTax.org board of directors is comprised of business leaders who are visionary in their own right. For over 10 years, they have committed their time, energy, and financial support to make the FairTax happen. Each of them provides here a view into their personal motivation. We're going to come back to who these people are, so I'm going to talk about some of these various things. One of the things that mentioned was a taxpayer. Most benefit the economy and the taxpayer. What is a taxpayer? If you want to know what a taxpayer really is, it's not what you think it is. Go to hourthetime.com and do a search in the search box for taxpayer. You will be shocked at what a taxpayer is. And I'll give you a little hint. It is a subject, a person that is a subject. And we'll get to more of that here in a little bit. And now, it says that they begin as a research organization with the initial goal of finding out what the American people wanted in a tax system. The goal was not to find out what was constitutional and to do what was right. It was about finding out, all right, here's a tax system, what would you want? Not about, let's get things back to the Constitution. Let's get back to the way things originally were. So it's, these things are subtle and you have to look at them closely to pick them up. So they want to keep the tax system. That's what they want. And another thing, you just keep listening. I'm going to share with you, where they discuss their true agenda, their true goal of what that was. All right, let's look at some of the board of directors. Leo E. Lindbeck Jr., the founder and the chairman. And he says, the tax system is the most fundamental interface of the citizen with his government. And in America, uniquely, the citizen is sovereign. So when you read it, it's like, oh man, this guy knows his stuff. The citizen is sovereign. The state only has those powers that are expressly delegated to it by the citizen. And yet the citizen, in the most fundamental interaction with government in the tax system, does not understand it. That is not healthy. We do not want to leave for our children and grandchildren a society that was shackled with that kind of dysfunctional system, such that it put in jeopardy the whole fabric of the American society and our economy. And that's what motivated us to get involved. You see, he has all the buzzwords, all the right buzzwords that will suck people in, that, all about being free and all about, grassroots movements and patriotism. They're like, yeah, this guy's one of us. He uses all the buzzwords and you're just being fooled. Okay. Citizen is sovereign. You can't be a sovereign and be a subject. If you're a taxpayer, then you are subject to the government. Go to Hour of the Time. You don't believe me, go to the hourthetime.com, search for taxpayer. You're going to see it on the federal level. And then there are other examples of on the state level, what does a taxpayer mean? And the state level definitions means you are their subject. So how can these people say they want to benefit you, the taxpayers, but also say you're sovereign? You cannot be both. Okay, so let's go on to, of course he says, powers that are delegated to the state. Well, where did the citizens delegate these powers that they want to install a national sales tax? Where's the power to the state to do that? Where's the power to the federal government? You see, these people are talking out of both sides of their mouth. All right, next one, Robert McNair. And we're going to get in a little more details about these people, but, it's not too much detail. Robert McNair is the founder, finance chairman, and he said, I would love to help make capital accumulation easier for young entrepreneurs. The enactment of the FairTax would accomplish that goal. The cost of capital will be reduced under the FairTax, and young people, by choice, may reduce their consumption and have more after-tax dollars to invest in their business. What these people are starting to say is that if you don't want to pay taxes, then don't consume much, don't buy new items, buy everything used, and just, consume a little bit what you can get by with. I mean, listen to this. What does this sound like? Andrew J. Clark III, the director. The fair tax appeals to me primarily because it is fair. The consumption tax taxes most those who consume the most and affords American goods and services the opportunity to compete equally in the local, national, and international markets without the tax burden that currently weighs upon our American-made products. So what they're saying is you consume a lot, you're going to pay a lot more in taxes. That's just the way we want it to be. And if you have any comments, go to hourthetime.com, and for the posting there, the notice for tonight's broadcast, and go there and post comments, and we can have a discussion about this. Howard W. Horn Sr., the director, he says, the fair tax makes so much common sense. The key for me is that it's fair to everybody. We each prepare our own federal income tax returns, and no one knows but us if we're paying more taxes or less compared to last year. If the fair tax comes into being and it doesn't raise sufficient revenues, Congress will either have to cut spending or raise taxes. Either way, it will be out in the open and everyone will know. If they raise taxes, people would be aware of it and, in my view, would likely protest. That's a complete break within the current approach, which is a hidden snowball of taxes. What a bunch of baloney. I mean, you read this stuff and you start hearing these guys and you're like, so you're telling me that over the years Congress hasn't rose the amount, or not even Congress, maybe just the IRS, they haven't increased the amount of taxes that they charge? I mean, are you not paying more taxes than what you used to? Isn't there a lot going on saying, taxes will be increased in January of 2011? And are there protests going on? Not very much. Are the people doing something about this? No, because they all feel helpless because they don't have the solution-based, help. They're not really paying attention to Hour of the Time. They're not doing the research. So what really are they going to do? And he's basically saying that, the American people are a bunch of idiots because taxes have been raised and they keep threatening that they're going to raise them. And the people aren't protesting. They're not doing anything. And he says that's a complete break with the current approach. You see how these contrast in this? And it's not even true. So it continues to say the second thing that attracted me was that it would collect on unreported income, which to me is a major weakness of today's system. Too many people aren't paying their fair share. So we already have a tax system that's unconstitutional, but, if you don't pay your share, it's unfair. It's like, you're stealing my money, but you're telling me that I have to pay my fair share. We don't even know how many people there are, but we know there are many. Under the fair tax, everyone who buys new things would pay taxes regardless of where their money came from. So if you don't buy anything new anymore, then you would not be paying any taxes. So how would you be paying your fair share if you're not buying anything new? And one of the other things is the more money you have, you can buy, larger bulk of things. So let's say you buy a large amount of, your needs for a year. Well, if you have a ton of money, you can negotiate pricing, get lower pricings to buy a bulk load of stuff for the year, food, clothes, whatever, and say, I'll pay all this for a year and let's work out a cheaper deal. So still the rich will, be able to negotiate and have lower taxes still, even with this fair tax, and they try to say the rich won't have their loopholes and won't have these special deals or whatever. So they say the rich is going to pay their fair share like everybody else. Alan C. King, the director. The present tax system is broken. The fair tax is a bold and workable plan that would provide change for everyone in the U.S. And I wanted to be a part of it. Here we go. They have U.S. What's the U.S.? The United States is one of two things. Either in the plural form, it is the 50 states. In the singular form, it is the federal government. Here we are, back to jurisdiction. Federal government, the territories, Washington, D.C., the enclaves. So, when it comes to the tax code, the U.S. is the federal government. It's not the 50 states because of jurisdiction and even definitions when you go in to look at those in statutes. And he continues, all feedback is positive from the grassroots and from many politicians. The challenge is to get the message out to the grassroots in all 435 congressional districts. It's a huge challenge, but doable. So we are going to take another musical break, and we will be back to discuss some more. And just wait till you hear more of the information that I have. And it looks like we are going to continue with more of the people behind the fair tax, more of the history and what these people that are deeper of these directors and what they have to say about it. And we will be continuing with this series. Looks to be that it's going to be a few broadcasts in this series because I've just gotten started and I talk a lot, so I have a lot of commentary on this. And let's see if I can get through this next one. I have a few minutes here left. And this comes from the FairTax, their blog, and their CEO Leo Lindbeck on the FairTax in some journal. That was December the 26th in 2007. Let's see. It says, much has been written lately about the fair tax, the proposal to replace the current federal income tax with a national retail sales tax. Unfortunately, much of it is wrong. This country needs a spirited and wide-ranging debate about fundamental tax reform, but that debate is not advanced by misimpressions and distortions of the fair tax. Let us clear up a few. One assertion about the fair tax is that it began as a project of the Church of Scientology at a time when it was seeking tax-exempt status. This is false. The fair tax actually comes to us from market research conducted more than a decade ago by a handful of business leaders. Their goal was to determine what type of tax system would be most acceptable to the American public. The studies they paid for cost millions of dollars. Remember I said all the money behind it, included hard economic research by respected scholars, and were subjected to critical peer review. The result is a proposal since introduced as legislation in Congress, now known as the fair tax. What emerged from this research is that a national retail sales tax is a preferred method of taxation among most Americans surveyed. Another is that the tax would have significant benefits for the nation's economy. And one of my thoughts on that was majority rule, because it's about what's among most Americans, what they wanted. Okay, continuing on. Why? Because it eliminates income taxes and payroll taxes for Social Security and Medicare, which are costly to collect and end up as embedded in the price of everything we buy. Along with getting rid of the Internal Revenue Service and the complexities of the income tax code, the fair tax would eliminate the distorting effect that income and payroll taxes have on the economy. Research on the price of consumer goods reveals that up to 20% of all prices today represent hidden income taxes and payroll taxes. Once these taxes are repealed and replaced with the fair tax, it is likely that market pressure would force retail prices to fall. I like how he says likely because they can't say that it will. There is no guarantee and no proof that this will drop the prices. On one hand, if you ever notice that once prices go up, even though prices should come down because of certain circumstances, they don't always come down. Eliminating embedded taxes will also do something else. It will remove significant price disadvantages suffered by American producers competing with tax-free imports. Eliminating corporate income taxes and capital gains taxes, which the FairTax will do, would likely make the American economy the most desirable place in the world to do business. Here we go again with likely. Another benefit of the FairTax is that, unlike other sales tax, it would not hit the poorest Americans the hardest. The FairTax proposal calls for sending every American, remember we're going to discuss that, a prepaid check to offset the cost of the national sales taxes paid by those living in poverty. This feature would effectively exempt those living below the poverty line from paying taxes to the federal government and provide all taxpayers with a reimbursement of a portion of taxes paid. The FairTax rate is 23% on retail sales when calculated inconclusively as are income tax rates. It will, in a fairer, more transparent, and less expensive way, raise the same amount of money the federal government now collects through the income and payroll taxes. Because it would be levied on consumption at the final point of sale instead of earnings, it would dramatically expand the tax base. The FairTax would collect revenue from the underground economy. Even illegal immigrants and the 40 million foreign tourists who visit the U.S. each year would pay it. So now they'll say, oh yeah, let's keep the illegal immigrants here. Matter of fact, let's help them to get here so you can collect more taxes on them. And now you want the tourists who come to visit your country to pay your income taxes through sales tax? I can't even say this word for some reason. The distributional effects of the FairTax have been extensively studied, and although the proposal has distinct advantages for investors and wealth creation across the income spectrum, the greatest benefit of FairTax is to low and moderate income Americans. The effect of eliminating regressive payroll taxes is commonly overlooked when analyzing the FairTax, but it would have a significant impact as these taxes represent the single largest burden on these income earners. And as I already told you, that actually, I have nothing against the wealthy, but, they like to play the poor and the middle class against the wealthy. The wealthy they have money, they have buying power, and they can get prices reduced, which would decrease their tax burden. So they would still benefit. Significantly, the FairTax eliminates all loopholes, gimmicks, exemptions, and deductions from the federal tax system. Under the FairTax, Congress would no longer be able to reward friends, punish enemies, or manipulate behavior through the tax code. The FairTax would also eliminate the lucrative tax lobbying practices that represent more than 50% of all lobby dollars spent annually in Washington. And, also what they don't tell you is it eliminates a crucial piece of legislation which is rarely disclosed about tax liability. And when we look at the bill, we are going to take a look at that. It's no surprise then to see that vested interests have argued against the FairTax and in favor of keeping the mortgage interest deduction. But wouldn't it be better for everyone to stop the IRS from withholding from paychecks to see the price of new homes and all other goods drop by removing embedded costs and have interest rates fall as the saving rates increase? See, here they go with all the emotional stuff. See, they start getting your emotion involved and it's just bypassing your logic. Is it really in everyone's interest to keep the income tax system so that 1/3 of taxpayers can go on deducting a portion of their mortgage interest from their federal taxes? And again, they make these claims, but there's no guarantee this is going to happen. And so now they start talking about everyone's interest instead of, the majority. There have been many tax reform proposals over the years, but most of them simply call for reforming around the margins of the existing tax system. The President's Advisory Panel on Tax Reform was assembled by the Bush administration and concluded its work a few years ago. Instead of seriously looking at the FairTax, the panel looked at a very different type of consumption tax, riddled with exemptions, and then declared that it would be too expensive and that the rate would have to be far higher than the fair tax rate. Politically, the fair tax will only become law once enough citizens demand that it be enacted, overcoming the self-interest that member of Congress and others have been holding on to the current system. It is debatable whether a modern citizen-led tax revolution is possible. But the growing popularity, even among presidential candidates, of the fair tax suggests that another Boston Tea Party may be at hand. So here we go. This guy is talking about a revolution. And how does the fair tax, how is this going to get put into legislation and get passed and put into force if enough citizens demand that it be enacted? So I wonder, the sovereigns, the citizens, if enough of them, enough of us demand that something be changed, then we can get that done. I wonder what kind of ideas that we could come up with to demand that things get done. I find this, this is the founder, the guy that started the fair tax, and he knows that citizens are sovereign, but he also knows that it's going to take the citizens to demand this. So what they are doing with their grassroots, what they're advertising, their education, they're educating the people, and they're educating different people in Congress and the government. But what happens if enough people start demanding enough is enough? We're going to go back to the Constitution. We've had enough of your shenanigans, enough of your charades. We're going to go back to the Constitution, and you are a big fat pig, federal government. You're a big fat pig. You are overgrown, and it's time for you to go back to your limits. You need to reduce your budget. It's time for you to reduce your departments because you are overpowered. You are grabbing too much power that is not yours. You do not have the authority to do this. And you start pushing back and demanding that they reduce their budgets and they stop consuming so much money, and we stop it with these unnecessary wars and spending these trillions and trillions of dollars. So if it's up to us to demand for something to be enacted, then let's demand something that is going to truly benefit us. It's not going to be something secretive, like in secret. It's like, oh, look how good this is. But when we see what their true agenda is, we know that it's about benefiting the federal government, and we see more about these people and their backgrounds and what they're involved in and what they who their close ties are. It's just really enlightening when you start looking into the background, and you just have to start asking more questions. So that's what we're going to do next time, is we're going to start looking into some additional information about Leo Lindbeck Jr. He's the guy that started this, the founder, and the other founder, Bob McNair. We're going to look a little bit into him, and then we are going to look into this open letter. We're going to look at an open letter from the fair tax to the President, the Congress, and the American people concerning the reform of the federal tax code. Just wait till you, oh man, you're not going to believe what they say in this. That is just so revealing. And then from there, I'm going to read some about the fair tax, just so you can see some of the information that is out there before we get into the FairTax bill itself. And so this looks like it could be another maybe one or two broadcasts before we actually get into the bill. And you will be glad that you'll listen to this whole series and you really learn about this, but use this to educate yourself, to not be a sheeple and just believe what people are telling you and stop regurgitating information. When I talk to people, they say, we got to get rid of the IRS and the FairTax is the only way. No, FairTax is not the only way. And it's all this propaganda that you are buying into. Well, that wraps it up for tonight, and tomorrow we will go into this next broadcast, looking more into some of these people, and it's going to be exciting. And I will see you. I will talk to you tomorrow.